What if the desperate urge to win an argument, to land that perfect, silencing remark, is the very chain that keeps you enslaved? What if the power you seek isn't in the other person's sudden, stunned silence, but in a profound quietude you discover within yourself, a quiet so unshakable that their words become mere weather, passing over the unbreachable walls of your inner fortress? By the end of our time together, you will understand how to build this fortress. I will not give you a list of clever retorts that fade with the moment's heat. Instead, I will give you the architectural principles of a mind that cannot be conquered, and we will close a loop you may not even know is open, the search for a silence that is not an absence of noise, but a presence of peace. Before we lay the first stone, a necessary word of caution. The philosophy we explore here is a map, honed over millennia, for navigating the territory of the human condition. It is not, however, the territory itself. This is a work of educational exploration, not a substitute for professional counsel, be it psychological, medical, or legal. You are the sovereign of your own mind and the ultimate arbiter of your life's decisions. Use these ideas as a whetstone to sharpen your own judgment, not as a dogmatic command. Reflect, question, and adapt what serves you. The wisest path is always your own. We live in an age of noise, a relentless cascade of opinions, provocations, and demands for our reaction. Arguments erupt not from a search for truth, but from a clash of egos. In the boardroom, at the family dinner table, in the anonymous inferno of a comment section, we feel it. That rising heat, that tightening in the chest, the frantic search for a verbal weapon sharp enough to cut through the static and force a conclusion. The temptation is to fight fire with a larger fire, to answer volume with greater volume, to meet aggression with a more cunning aggression. We believe that victory is measured in the opponent's retreat, in their grudging concession, or, most satisfyingly, in their speechless defeat. This is the logic of the arena, not the study. It is a game of momentary domination that leaves us exhausted, exposed, and often more fragile than before. The ancient Stoics understood this trap with a clarity that cuts across 2,000 years. They saw that the person who can be provoked is a puppet whose strings are held by another. The person who must shout to be heard has already confessed the weakness of their position. They taught that true power, the only kind that cannot be taken from you, is not the power to control others' words, but the power to master your own response. It is the quiet, internal authority that comes from understanding what is yours to command and what is not. This is the cornerstone of all Stoic practice, the great dichotomy of control. It is a simple, yet life-altering, division of reality. On one side, there are the things within our complete power, our judgments, our intentions, our choices, our character. This is our inner kingdom, the citadel of the self. On the other side, there are the things not within our complete power, what other people say, what they think, how they act, our reputation, our health, the tides of fortune. These are externals, the weather outside the fortress walls. The fundamental error of an untrained mind is to invest its peace and identity in the weather while neglecting the architecture of the fortress. When someone insults you, they are creating weather. When they shout, it is merely thunder. When they try to impose their will, it is but a strong wind. You cannot command the storm to cease, but you can ensure your walls are sound and your foundation is deep. To try and silence them with a clever phrase is to run outside and shout at the hurricane. To cultivate internal stillness is to sit by the fire within your citadel, observing the storm, untouched. The 5 smart responses you may have heard of are not magic spells. They are the external echoes of an internal state. Without that internal state, they are hollow tactics, easily parried, but when they arise from a place of genuine self-possession, they carry the weight of gravity. They don't silence the other person through verbal trickery. They invite the other person into a space of such profound calm that their own agitation becomes unsustainable, a fire with no oxygen to consume. Consider the man who seemed to have it all. Let us call him David. David was a senior executive at a competitive tech firm known for his ferocious intellect and even more ferocious temper. In meetings, he was a warlord. He used sarcasm like a scalpel and shouting as a battering ram. He never lost an argument. His subordinates learned to fall silent, not because they were convinced, but because they were exhausted and intimidated. He believed their silence was a sign of his strength, a testament to his correctness. He mistook fear for respect. One afternoon, during a tense project review, a brilliant junior engineer, let's call her Anya, presented a dataset that suggested David's pet project was heading for a catastrophic failure. Her analysis was meticulous, her logic undeniable. David did not see data, he saw a threat. His voice, at first cold and sharp, rose to a roar. He didn't refute her points. He attacked her experience, her tone, her audacity. He spoke of loyalty and team unity, which in his mouth were synonyms for obedience. Anya tried to respond, to walk him through the numbers again, but he cut her off with each attempt. Finally, red-faced and triumphant, he slammed his hand on the table. "This discussion is over. We are moving forward, as planned." The room fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence. David looked around, breathing heavily, seeing the silence he always craved. He had won, but he had lost. That evening, Anya quietly submitted her resignation. Within a month, 2 other key engineers from her team followed. The project, deprived of its most insightful critics, did indeed fail, costing the company millions and David his promotion. Years later, having been pushed out of the company he helped build, David would reflect on that moment. The silence he had commanded was not the silence of agreement. It was the silence of dissent driven underground. It was the silence of talent packing its bags. It was the silence of a bridge being burned. He had spent his entire career trying to control the weather, and in doing so, had let his fortress crumble from within. David's mistake was a failure to understand the mirror. The ancient Stoics taught that what others say is a reflection not of you, but of them. Their anger, their contempt, their sarcasm, these are projections of their own internal state, their own judgments, their own fears. An insult is a confession. When someone shouts, "You're an idiot," the objective event is merely sound waves vibrating the air. The judgment, "I am being attacked, I must defend my honor, I must prove I am not an idiot," is a story you add. A Stoic practitioner learns to insert a pause between the sound and the story. In that pause, they can look at the speaker not as an adversary, but as a physician might look at a patient, observing the symptoms of a troubled soul. This is the principle behind the phrase, "The way you speak says more about you than it does about me." Uttered as a defensive barb, it is weak, but when it arises from a genuine, almost compassionate understanding that the person before you is revealing their own inner turmoil, it becomes an act of profound disengagement. You are not returning fire. You are holding up a mirror. You are refusing to accept the parcel of their anger. You are making it clear that their weather will not become your climate. The person is left alone with their reflection, and often that is the most sobering confrontation of all. They expect a fight, a reaction, a confirmation of their power to provoke. When they receive only calm observation, their entire strategy collapses. They are left shouting into a void, and the only echo they hear is the sound of their own distress. Now, let us turn to a different story, one of a quiet awakening. Maria was a high school history teacher, deeply passionate about her subject but quiet by nature. In the staff room, she was the frequent target of a colleague named Thomas, a man whose cynicism was a shield for his own disappointments. Thomas would mock her enthusiasm in front of others, making dismissive comments about her idealism or a soft approach with students. For months, Maria endured it, her stomach twisting into knots before she even entered the room. Then she decided to fight back. She read articles on witty comebacks. She rehearsed clever lines in the car on her way to work. The next time Thomas made a sarcastic remark about her lesson plan, Maria was ready. She fired back a sharp, well-practiced retort that earned a few chuckles from other teachers. Thomas was momentarily surprised, but then his eyes narrowed. The game was on. The following weeks became a low-grade war of attrition. Their exchanges grew more pointed, more personal. Maria won some rounds, Thomas won others, but she was miserable. The victories felt hollow. She was spending her precious mental energy devising counterattacks, replaying conversations in her mind, steeping in resentment. She had become a participant in the very ugliness she despised. She was playing Thomas's game, by Thomas's rules. Her awakening came not in a moment of triumph, but in a moment of exhaustion. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly nasty exchange, she sat in her empty classroom and felt the full weight of her fatigue. She realized she had been trying to control the uncontrollable, Thomas's behavior. Her mistake was believing that the solution was external, the perfect comeback, the winning argument. The Stoics would say she had neglected her citadel. Her inner peace was being dictated by another person's moods. It was then she grasped the concept of time's prohairesis, time's our faculty of choice, our moral will. This, the Stoics argued, is the divine spark within us. We cannot choose what happens, but we can always, always, choose our response. This is not about choosing the right words to say to Thomas. It is about choosing what kind of game you are willing to play. It is the power to set the terms of your own engagement. The following Monday, Thomas started in again, this time criticizing her for staying late to help a struggling student. "Still trying to save the world, Maria," he said with a smirk. The old Maria would have felt the surge of adrenaline, the frantic search for a reply. But the new Maria did something different. She took a quiet breath. She turned to him, not with anger, but with a simple, untroubled clarity. She said, "Thomas, I am no longer going to participate in these kinds of conversations with you." She did not say it to silence him. She said it to honor her own peace. She then picked up her bag and walked out of the staff room, not in a huff, but with the calm of a decision finally made. The effect was astonishing. Thomas was left speechless, his sarcastic remark hanging in the air. There was no argument to win, no witty retort to counter. Maria had not played his game. She had simply declared that she was on a different field altogether. This is the essence of the boundary-setting phrases. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully, or even more definitively, I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. They are not acts of retreat, they are declarations of sovereignty. You are announcing the laws that govern your own kingdom. You are stating, calmly and without apology, that your inner peace is not open for public debate. You are choosing to protect your own mind, which is the only thing truly yours to protect. Maria didn't need to silence Thomas. She needed to reclaim her own silence. From that day on, her relationship with her work and with herself began to transform. Thomas, for his part, mostly left her alone. He was a bully, and a bully's power evaporates without a reaction. This brings us to our third story, a deliberate, conscious transformation. Lena was a young entrepreneur, the founder of a small software company built on ethical principles. She had secured a meeting with a powerful venture capitalist, a man we'll call Julian. Julian was known for two things: making his investors very rich, and a brutal negotiating style that involved belittling founders to drive down their valuation. Lena knew this going in. She was terrified. Her mentors had coached her on her pitch, her numbers, her growth strategy. But Lena knew the real challenge would not be the business plan, it would be the psychological assault. Instead of preparing clever rebuttals, Lena spent the week before the meeting preparing her mind. She practiced the Stoic art of premeditation of evils, or times premeditatio malorum asterisk. She visualized the worst-case scenario. Julian laughing at her ideas, picking apart her experience, telling her she was naive. She imagined the feeling of shame, of anger, of wanting to run from the room. By sitting with these imagined feelings in advance, she began to strip them of their power. She was vaccinating herself against the shock. She also clarified her core principles. She wrote down, on a single index card, her non-negotiables, the valuation floor she would not go below, the company values she would not compromise, and her right to be treated with professional respect. This card was her constitution. It was the architectural plan for her inner citadel. She understood that Julian's goal would be to make her feel emotional and reactive, to pull her out of her logical mind and into a state of fear. Her goal was to remain within her fortress, anchored to her principles. The meeting began as expected. Julian was charming at first, then began his attack. He called her projections adorable. He questioned her technical background. He patronizingly explained basic market dynamics to her as if she were a child. The old Lena would have become flustered, defensive, launching into long-winded justifications. But the prepared Lena did something different. When he called her projections adorable, she didn't argue. She simply smiled faintly and said, "They're based on the most conservative models. Shall we walk through the data?" She refused to engage with the emotion. She calmly redirected to the logic. She held the frame. The crucial moment came when Julian presented his offer, a lowball valuation coupled with terms that would give him overwhelming control. He delivered it with an air of finality, as if it were a gift she should be grateful for. "This is the best you're going to get in this market, Lena. Take it or leave it." He leaned back, expecting her to crumble. Lena looked at him, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. She glanced at the principles she had internalized. She didn't become angry. She didn't plead. She simply embodied the final, most elegant Stoic response. She acknowledged his reality without surrendering her own. "Julian," she said calmly, "I respect that this is the offer you're able to make. I appreciate the time you've taken. However, that is not a valuation that reflects the company's current performance or its future potential, and those terms are not aligned with our long-term vision. So, respectfully, I will have to decline." She did not say, "That's your opinion, and I don't share it," as a flippant comeback. She lived it. She showed it. She respected his right to have his opinion and his offer, but she demonstrated that it had no power over her own well-reasoned judgment. A profound silence filled the boardroom. It wasn't the awkward silence of a failed negotiation. It was the silence of a power dynamic shifting in real time. Julian was an expert at manipulating people who needed his approval. He had no playbook for someone who was willing to walk away, not out of anger, but out of principle. He had met a sovereign, not a subject. He saw not a desperate founder, but an equal. After a long moment, he cleared his throat. "Wait," he said, his tone entirely different. "Let's talk about the numbers again." Lena did not end up taking his money, but she walked out of that room with something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge of her own strength. She had faced the dragon and discovered it was just a man, and that its fire had no power over a mind that refused to be burned. Her power was not in silencing him, it was in her ability to remain true to herself, even under immense pressure. These stories, David's downfall, Maria's awakening, Lena's transformation, illustrate the arc of this wisdom. We begin, like David, believing power is imposition. We may evolve, like Maria, to see the futility of reactive tactics and learn the power of setting boundaries. And with practice, we can arrive where Lena did, at a place of principled, proactive calm, where our actions are dictated not by external provocations, but by internal convictions. So let us revisit the tools, not as a list of phrases, but as expressions of a cultivated mind. I don't need to raise my voice to be right. This is the expression of a mind that trusts in logos, in reason and logic. It declares that the merit of an idea is not measured in decibels. It is a refusal to descend into emotional chaos, a calm insistence on remaining in the realm of clarity. The way you speak says more about you than it does about me. This is the expression of a mind that has mastered the dichotomy of control. It is a mind that does not mistake the weather for the fortress. It holds up the mirror, not as a weapon, but as a diagnostic tool, reflecting the other person's state back to them while protecting its own. Let's talk when we can do it respectfully. And I'd prefer not to continue this conversation. These are the expressions of a mind that understands its own sovereignty. This is times proheresis times inaction. It is the architect declaring the building codes for their own consciousness. It is the understanding that true freedom includes the freedom to not participate, to conserve your most precious resource, your attention and your peace. And finally, that's your opinion, and I respect it, but I don't share it. This is the expression of a mind that is emotionally independent. It does not require external validation. It can hear a differing worldview without feeling threatened. It is a statement of quiet self-confidence, a mind that can respect another's map of the world while navigating by its own. Do you see now? The goal was never to collect a quiver of verbal arrows to silence others. That is a child's game of power. The goal is to become the kind of person who doesn't need to. It is to build an inner life so robust, so well-ordered, and so peaceful that the insults and provocations of the world wash over it like waves on a granite cliff. The silence you are seeking is not in their mouth, but in your mind. When you achieve that inner quietude, you will find that others often fall silent in your presence, not because they are defeated, but because they are in the presence of a strength they don't understand, a peace they unconsciously crave. This is not a quick fix. It is a lifelong practice, an art. It is the work of transforming your very operating system. You practice in small moments in traffic, in a frustrating email exchange, in a minor disagreement, so that you are prepared for the large ones. You train in times of peace for the inevitable moments of war. You are the architect, the stonemason, and the guardian of your own mind. The architecture of this inner citadel is a vast and rewarding subject. Having laid the foundation by mastering our responses to others, the next logical step is to strengthen our resilience against the blows of fortune itself. We must learn not just how to handle insults, but how to handle loss, failure, and hardship. The Stoics had a powerful and counterintuitive discipline for this, a mental tool for forging unbreakable resilience. They called it times premeditatio malorum, times the premeditation of evils. It is the practice of imagining the loss of all that we hold dear, not to create anxiety, but to extinguish it. It is the next chapter in building a soul that is truly free.